Y'all, welcome back to Kentucky Fried Wargaming, where two guys who are qualified to talk about anything decide to talk about games with hard math and chance. I'm Joe.
And I'm John.
And today, we are coming to you with an episode that we've spent a long time prepping for, and ironically ended up with maybe our longest notes we were just talking about. And that is Infinity.
Yes.
By Covus Belli. And, whew, what a game. We have been playing Infinity now since, November of 2024? Somewhere in there?
Yeah, so about 6 to 8 months, give or take.
Some of that we weren't playing very much. Holiday schedules were rough, but we did a whole lot of learning matches of the game, and then also, we recently just got done with a shop league, which makes it now feel like we have played enough of the game at enough point levels with enough experience to at least talk about it with a little bit of knowledge.
Yeah, this is a deep game. Spoiler for those who don't know. And so we couldn't really, play a couple of intro games and give you a representative experience. It did, I think more than any other game we've played, require a lot of on-table time to be able to even discuss it at a basic level.
Mm-hmm. It was like drinking from a fire hose. Oh, buddy. It's an incredible game with a whole lot of really great pieces, but some of the community reputation we found was interesting. And we figured it was worth talking about, at least just to share our experience of what we found when we tried playing it. What was it like as the learning experience goes. And just sort of pitch it for people who know nothing about Infinity as a game. To do that, I think the first thing we got to do is start off with lore, right? In every game we ever talk about, we got to start with the lore. And I will say one of the things I did not expect in getting into Infinity was how much lore there was. Every time I heard this game talked about, it's always in the context of how good it is competitively or how balanced the mechanics are, stuff like that, not how interesting the lore is. But I really do think that there is a lot of fluff here that is cool.
Yeah, I also think that it's just a from the get-go thing with some of this lore is that it's different, right? One of the prevailing concepts in all of wargaming is everyone has to be able to fight each other. And sometimes the premise for that is very too ultra-violency, right?
Yes.
Looking at Warhammer or Trench Crusade or some of the stuff, there's not a lot of rooted in why. But I think one of the things Infinity does from the get-go is give you something that's different and gives you a reason for why these fights are happening in a believable package.
Yes. Because it does start with our world as we know it today, right? The lore for Infinity as we know it up until our current year is as we know it, with all of the countries that you know and the places you know, the geopolitics that you know. And then in their fluff, where the game currently is, takes place 200 years later, but the foundations of what sets everything up happens sooner after that. In the world of Infinity, humanity starts to spread out to the stars, as we are currently starting to do in the most budding manner. And as they push outwards and explore, we as a species find a stable wormhole. And in sending probes through that wormhole, we find another part of the galaxy that the wormhole would send you to, and a planet that is ripe for settlement. It's similar to Earth's atmosphere, it's similar to Earth's temperature, it's similar to Earth's gravity, and seems like it would be a way for humanity to take that first step into settling among the stars on an evergreen planet to start spreading out. When this starts to happen, a coalition is formed who start to fund this big expedition, as you can imagine, and trying to make the first real colony ship. It's a massively expensive endeavor, which is why
Yep.
many of the global powers who fund it are really big names. The United States, the European Union, Russia, all start dumping money into this. I also think some of Canada, bad at some of the earliest lore. But a lot of huge powers in our current day and age back this project, put a bunch of money into it, their best researchers, and then send the ship out through the wormhole. And then communication with the ship is lost. The wormhole closes. Everyone assumes they are dead. It's a failed expedition. And this bankrupts all of these countries.
But don't worry, they return later, but with werewolves.
We'll get there. So this bankrupts all these countries who lose their geopolitical power because they don't have the money that normally they used. And this leaves a power vacuum on Earth. And it's that power vacuum which sets up all of the factions that you see in modern Infinity. And I feel like to understand the setting, you have to understand this event because it's what makes the whole setting viable at the time that we're playing it and running around.
Yeah, because essentially, it like the collapse of all what is the established superpowers for like well over 100 years creates this situation where some of the already rising powers can now solidify without any sort of backlash their power structures. And the biggest one there is China.
Yes. Who start to expand outwards and unify with other countries. Some things get wibbly, but they start to like grab other countries in East Asia and form a coalition, assimilating multiple Asiatic nations into one single power known as Yujing. And this power they then use to start asserting soft power and using a whole lot of really refined intelligence services to leverage their own abilities and become a rising star in this vacuum, right? At our current day and age, China is already ascendant, and they just use this to skyrocket and really like solidify their hold over a much larger land base than they currently have. However, this doesn't go unanswered because there are many other countries and nations and cultures around the world who go, oh shit, I don't want to get gobbled up by Yujing. We have to do something. And this leads to the second colossal superpower being created, Pan-Oceania, where Australia, New Zealand, the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, India, Chile, Brazil all start their own collective charter, Pan-Oceania, in response to using.
And
Yuqing?
significant...
I think Yuqing.
Is Yuqing. And also another big reason why Pan-Oceania gets formed, and you'll notice by some of these, it's because of religious reasons. Like one of the big things with Yuqing is that they don't allow religious orders necessarily. Like it's very Eastern philosophy focused, whereas with the collapse of most of the normal superpowers, things like Christianity don't really have anywhere to go. And so with Catholicism starting to become back on the rise in the setting, they sort of go with Pano, which is why when you look at some of the Pan-Oceania models, you'll see what looks like Templar Knights in space armor. Because that's the Catholic Church. Like the Catholic Church sides with this superpower, and I believe now is centered in Chile in Brazil instead of the Vatican, as we now know it.
Which gives them a large amount of cultural pull, but also in all of these countries getting together, they combine their collective production, research, and trade capabilities, and they end up rising to the top of the heap economically and through their technological innovation. They become the tech overlords, the Silicon Valley, if you will, of the setting. And even in modern Infinity, these are the two largest, most powerful entities, and their rise shapes the entirety of the setting. And around them, other factions start to sprout up. So as they are both rising, geopolitical pressure around Earth starts to mount, and other cultures start to respond in an attempt to retain their autonomy. Hakislam is formed, which is a humanist revision of Islam. It makes their own nation state and heads to the stars. Ariadne is formed as an autonomous state when it is discovered that, plot twist, the colony ship that lost contact wasn't dead. They landed on the planet Dawn and have been settling it for like 150 years at the time that they are found. And now, seeing there are new superpowers who want to own them, assert their own autonomy and insist that they should be their own people. Then you have the nomads spring up, who are spacefaring fleets of anarcho-collectivists?
It's
Socialists?
complicated.
It's wibbly wobbly.
There's a whole lot of good stuff going on in Nomads. It's effectively where if anybody who doesn't fit into the normal status quo in the rest of the human sphere goes to Nomads.
Yes. And largely they're formed in reaction to the creation of Aleph, which is a super AI that is overseeing all of the human sphere to help ease issues with logistics and communications and conflict. And
Sure.
There's more fluff here I'm not getting into. But yes, the super AI made the nomads angry, hence nomads appearing. And at the point in the setting where we are, humanity has spread all across the stars, terraforming worlds to settle underneath all of these various powers. And largely, the human race exists in great comfort, with baseline living standards that, even compared to our current standards, is incredibly high. The average person lives a life of safety, security, and comfort without worrying about where their next meal's going to come from or how they're going to pay their bills. And on the surface, it's a utopia. But that's in part because outright full-scale warfare is a thing of the past. However, conflict is not. Instead, it has just morphed. Now,
Yes.
all of these battles happen in the shadows by elite teams of highly trained, deniable specialists looking to accomplish key goals.
Highly trained is a wide statement because on the other side of this, you also have like even Pan-Oceania, a technological superpower where everyone has like a wonderful life, right? One of the most common things they use as a deniable asset are members of the former superpower countries, such as the United States or the EU or Russia, that are still around in those regions. They hire them as corporate soldiers with very little investment into them to earn citizenship within Pan-Oceania.
I.e., conscripts. Look, I admit they have a better PR than that, but yeah. But all of the fighting now happens quietly as is possible. Because to have it go full-blown would interrupt everyone's money flow and plans, and no one wants that. And that's where you come in. You control one of these covert teams of ragtag warriors as they fight against other operators in the field. Your success is defined by your wit, your guile, your tenacity, and your team's survival is always entirely uncertain. And if that's sort of the fluff, now let's get into some of the tabletop stuff, right? Like, I do think this world is really, really cool. I think this setting is great. In 40K, one of the jokes is that, like, everyone laughs because it's so wantonly satirical and not unbelievable that it could happen. I feel like Infinity's lore is far more grounded. It works off of existing geopolitics, which gives it a sense of tangibility, I guess, that other settings just don't seem to have, and I like that a lot.
Yeah, like it takes a lot of like what is sort of dry subjects to some people, and just uses it to build a foundation that they then insert stuff like werewolves. Werewolf soldiers.
Because on Dawn,
like,
there are species that are like lupine creatures that reproduce virally,
Yeah.
but if that virus infects a human, werewolf stuff happens. It's awesome.
And then there's, giant robots and tags, tactical armored gears, which are effectively like what a battle tank is when you need to not be able to, you don't have the logistics power and of like a main war going on to have tanks necessarily rolling up all the time. So you want to have like tactical armored suits, right? Or you have this like crazy stuff in Nomads because it's super cyberpunk future. So they got wild stuff in there. We have cyber samurai that roll around with like super monofilament katanas cutting stuff in half. But like all of that is believable under the guise of what the initial really concrete foundation narratively creates. That when someone goes, oh yeah, I'm playing an army that is all just like ragtag underdog dudes with like assault rifles, but they also have werewolves, and that's how they fight the dudes with like super space armor. Like, you know what? That makes sense. I think a werewolf could fight a robot.
I don't know. That werewolf's got a lot of muscle. I buy it. All right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Whereas I think that, and so the ability to sort of stretch what's going on in the game to make it all make sense a little narratively is much easier in this game as opposed to sometimes in 40K you're like, so why is like my Black Templars fighting your Sisters of Battle? Ah, well, meme. Gotcha. Let's go.
Love it. And now for the tabletop stuff, right? Let's zoom in just a little. On the tabletop, how does it play? And at its core, it looks pretty simple from the outside. You take teams, you each take a fire team of up to 15 miniatures, and attempt to accomplish various objectives in a terrain-dense skirmish board. And you're looking to sort of leverage and win the day through firefights, through digital hacking attacks, through covert espionage shenanigans, to push up, hit the button, do the objective, get the high-value target out of there, whatever the objective is, and get more points than your opponent. In most of this system hinges on one key pillar called the ARO system. You're going to hear us talk about it an absolute ton. You cannot play Infinity without knowing what this is. It is like the flagship mechanic of this game that makes Infinity unique. And it stands for automatic reaction order.
Yeah, one of the things that a lot of people don't understand about Infinity is that they see this being played or talked about, and they assume that it has alternating activations. It does not. This game does not have that. It does have an I go on my turn, you go on your turn thing. But it is different in the sense that there is an active player and a reactive player. Mm-hmm. And the active player has a set of rules they can follow, and then the reactive player effectively gets another turn on their opponent's turn in which they can do different types of actions. It's a very unique system in this way where when you're playing the game, you really aren't ever not doing something. You're always doing something because there's an entire subsystem of how you're reacting to your opponent and doing a thing on their turn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's wild. So in short, like there are a lot of rules around how this system works, okay? And I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty because it makes a ton of sense if I don't get too detailed about it. In short, if your soldier's on the field and sees an opponent do something, they get to respond. All right? If your guy with a gun is sitting and looking over a field in the middle of a city, and the enemy's soldier tries to run across the field, your guy with gun gets a chance to do something about that. They could try to shoot him, more than likely, to stop them from doing that thing. Similarly, if the guy who you see running across the field shoots at you, you can respond to getting shot at. You could try to shoot back, or maybe you try to dodge out of the way and get behind some cover to protect yourself. You get to do something. Mm-hmm. And the whole game is built on this idea that even when your opponent is doing all of their stuff, when they're moving, when they're hitting buttons, when they're activating special abilities, when they're laying down mines, when they're trying to hack, you can react to all of that. If you could see them, or if you're close enough, if you can like hear them and sense them if they're close. That's the baseline, which makes a lot of this very, very, very interactive, even though it is, as John said, I go, you go. Like full turns.
there's been times where we've played this game where it just we forget who's actually on the active turn on occasion.
Yeah.
Because it's just so back and forthy, and it creates this vibe even within the rules itself of just like an actual firefight. You're responding to things. You're having to change your game plan in the middle of your opponent's turn. They're having to change their game plan in the middle of their turn. This game is not one that you can sort of math out. You can't plan out the entire game based off of like when you're building your list and like looking at a table. It's impossible. You have to learn how to pilot the pieces you have really well into your opponent's pieces and how they are piloting them.
Yes. And it really rewards that. Because it only lasts 3 rounds, but boy howdy, a lot happens in those rounds.
Yeah, and I would argue the game almost feels like 4 rounds, because even in deployment, it feels like its own game. And not in like we're doing this little money game where I'm deploying a guy and you're deploying a guy, I'm a counter deploy. It's like, it's like you're playing an info war, right? Like one of the funnest things about Infinity is that you're trying to understand what your opponent has and doesn't have and why they're doing these things in this way so that you can predict what they're doing and then counter them in like a cool tactical way and not like in I read 4 pages of text and I gave myself lethal hits way.
Yeah, we're out here trying to play like 18-dimensional chess. With some really cool intelligence rules. There are some rules that let you deploy in like a little token instead of your actual mini on the board, and someone has to like scan it to see if your guy is actually there. There's a shell game underneath. Some, you don't even put a token on the board. You take a picture of where the model is secretly at, and then you just wait until you want to reveal where it is. Others, your miniatures can be on the enemy's side of the table acting like civilians or like their units. It's really fun. There's a lot of shenanigans in deployment.
There's a rule where you can place a model down that you tell your opponent is one model, and then it can just all of a sudden surprise, actually, it's this other model.
Ha ha ha.
Oops.
So yes, deployment is wildly deep, but officially it's 3 rounds, and each has 2 turns. I get 1, you get 1, sort of style. And during your turn, you for every guy you have on the table, you build up your order pool. Which usually is like basically equal to the number of guys you have. There are exceptions, as everything I have ever going to say about Infinity. And then you could spend one of your little order tokens on a model to make that model do 2 things, such as move and shoot, or move and hack, stuff like that. And you then spend those orders on the various minis you want. You can activate one mini as many times as you'd like. You could spend 10 orders on one mini if you want to, but you spread them around, you spend all your orders, and every time you do an order, your opponent sees what you're doing and then can respond with an ARO in many cases. They might shoot at you, they might dodge, they might try to hack you. So every time you activate a miniature, you have to resolve all of those reactions before you then move on to the next token getting spent. And you go through all of that until you either use all of your tokens or just decide you don't want to activate any more guys, and then you pass it to your opponent, who does the same thing. And if they lost some guys, they lose some orders. When they make their order pool, the game rolls on. Then at bottom of 3, we add up all the points depending on the mission that we set up and see who has the most. Winner is the person who has the most points.
Mm-hmm.
It's all on the surface seems pretty standard skirmish stuff, right?
Buddy.
There's so much more. One of the things we have always heard about Infinity when we were trying to get into it is that it is a colossal cliff of a learning curve to try to move up it. And coming into this, I didn't expect everyone to be wrong, but I kind of thought, hey, I've played a lot of war games in my time. I've played some of them, even at like real competitive level. I'm not terrible with rules. I could probably feel this out. Maybe this learning curve won't be as bad for me. I was wrong.
Yeah, this was described to us as when we first talked about getting into it. Somebody told us, "Hey, don't try to teach this game to yourself. Like, get someone to teach you." Like, we've been playing Wargames forever. We can do this. Now, I will say, we did start off by just playing the two of us, and we did pretty okay with like 3 or 4 models on the table. And then we started escalating it a little bit, and then we proceeded to have to ask a billion questions because we could not figure it out ourselves. So we have a guy at our shop named Ben, who he's a wonderful guy, really great at Infinity, been playing for a long time. And so we asked him a billion questions.
Yes.
One of the other guys who runs the shop also was getting into Infinity and proceeded to play as many games as possible to help teach people, and also had a billion questions. And so we just have buried people that know more about this game in questions to try to understand it, because you reach like a certain level of competency in the game. You're like, okay, very, very basic. I understand moving and shooting and yada, yada, yada. But the second it starts to go from like a level 1 or 2 knowledge to a level like 4 or 5 knowledge out of 10, you're like, oh, this
no.
pool's really deep.
Oh no.
I'm drinking from a fire hose and I'm drowning. Someone help me.
Yeah, every rule in Infinity I ever read, I now just assume has exceptions. Every time. Every single time. I feel like each rule is just sort of like, oh yeah, here is X rule. Here's what happens if you are in cover. Unless this thing. And even that exception is superseded by X thing, which is superseded by Y thing. And, whew, it's a lot. It's a lot. And I think the only way to really try to show off what we mean is to walk through an example of one rule. We are only going to talk about one rule as an example. Because if
and this is actually a slight lie, because you can't talk about one rule in Infinity without also talking about other rules. But from the perspective of a single rule,
here's an ability that is very, very standard, right? This is called Multispectral Visor. We are putting it on the screen. Multispectral Visor is, in fluff, think of it sort of like targeting goggles, right? It helps your people sense soldiers who are across the field, even if they're in the dark, even if they're obscured by some other means of technology. The goggles help you to see them anyway. They give you a little HUD, your soldier sees better, shoots better. Cool. Cool. Really common even in modern soldiery. In the future, definitely would be more advanced. Great. And Multispectral Visor is broken up into 3 levels of Multispectral Visor. MSV1, MSV2, MSV3. These are different things. Multispectral Visor, level 1. You can see it on the screen. Multispectral Visor reduces the mod of mimetism -3 and low visibility zones to 0. The visor reduces the mod of mimetism -6 and poor visibility zones to -3. Additionally, it allows the user to draw a line of fire through 0 visibility zones, applying a -6 mod to any skill that requires line of fire. 4. Troopers equipped with this piece of equipment do not make face-to-face rolls against weapon using spoke ammunition. Okay, let's walk through it. This means that if your opponent has stealth technology going on, right? They're obscuring where they're at. They got camo, they got cloak. Normally that is written as mimetism and then a number, and that gives you negatives to shoot them. If they have okay mimetism, mimetism goes away. If they have really good mimetism, it gets worsened. Your goggles doesn't totally see through it, but it's helping.
It helps a little.
It does help. You will also see that there is mention of 3 different zones of visibility: low visibility, poor visibility, 0 visibility. I'm gonna be honest, I don't even know what low visibility and poor visibility are. It's 0 or nothing at every game I've ever played. But the one that matters is 0 invisibility. Because normally, that's stuff like smoke. Right?
Yes. So to sort of describe what the 3 would be, right? Low visibility and poor visibility are generally like area of effects. So you might have like random zone things on your tabletop that is decided as part of the mission that are areas of the map that have low or poor visibility, right? Those can exist. Zero visibility is generated from smoke grenades that people deploy on the table that create these template areas that are just covered in smoke, which you would, if you know anything about modern fighting, smoke grenades are used oftentimes to sort of obscure an area to allow movement within them with less likely of just getting shot.
Yes. So, what this lets you do is to be able to see through some of that haze of the smoke, see enemy targets, and take a shot at them. You're going to get a big negative to shoot them, but you get a shot. Okay. Very cool. Very cool. We go on to multispectral visor, level 2. It does the stuff that multispectral visor 1 does, but basically what it does is even better. If you have multispectral visor level 2, the big difference is that now, regardless of how good your opponent's mimetism is, you ignore it, you don't take the negatives, and you could see through smoke and shoot with impunity. No negatives. You have stronger goggles. They see even better. They have more penetration. The whole 9 yards. That's cool. That's cool. And you still get to ignore smoke, ammunition, and stuff. Okay. This one's not too bad, right? This one's not too bad. It just makes the stuff that level 1 does better. Even more. Now we go to level 3. So the first 3 bullet points are the same. But now, when you go to discover camouflage state tokens, normally you have to roll a willpower roll to see if you can hone in if someone's underneath there. Now you auto-pass it. That's incredible. When you use multispectral visor level 3, you can ignore a surprise attack mod rule, which we're not going to talk about. If they have line of fire, as the surprise attacker comes out of stealth, also, they, sorry, there's so much text here. Oh my god, this is a great learning example. They ignore all those mods, and you can perform a ballistic attack action on a camo marker without having to reveal it first, which normally is not the case. So now, in level 3, you have just touched a bajillion extra rules in addition to the other rules.
You can still shoot that camo marker, but you also now are affected under mimetism because you're using all of your goggles to be able to see them, but not be able to see past their mimetism if they have it. So there's another instance in there. So you can see where every level has its different purposes and would have different varying levels of importance. Obviously, if you could give everyone MSV level 3, everyone wants MSV level 3. But I will tell you, it's exceptionally rare. I can't tell you of a model off the top of my head that has it.
So it's rare, but it's a thing. However, even these are not without impunity. There are rules of the game that get around this. For example, there are other grenades that aren't just smoke. Think of it like static electricity and whatnot, that are like smoke grenades, but stronger. These are called eclipse grenades. Multispectral visors cannot see through eclipse grenades. So basically, you see, the way this works is if you throw down zero visibility, you're safe. Unless they have multispectral visor. Oh no! But if that smoke is actually eclipse, no multispectral visor. Hooray! So, exception. Also, multispectral visor, real good for getting around stealth people. But there is another rule out there called albedo, which basically lens flares all of these super sensitive goggles. And now, instead of getting benefits, when shooting the target that lens flares you, you get a ton of negatives for having these goggles on. So, an exception to all of these exceptions exists there as well.
And so one of the ways that it shows itself on game is that I might have a really cool sniper rifle guy with a multispectral visor who wants to shoot your guys who have mimetism.
Yes.
To get rid of this, to kill your guys. And you know this, so you're going to position a guy with albedo to come fight my multispectral visor guy, take away his bonuses, kill him, so that your other guys can move up in advance. Which is all very tactical and cool. But it can't be tactical and cool until you understand what the hell all that means.
Yes. Good Lord. Again, all of this is one skill on a sheet.
Yes.
One.
And that sounds like a whole lot of work, but let me explain like a short example using mimetism and smoke of what narratively this can do in the game, right? So say Model A has a ballistic skill of 13 and a multi-spectral visor level 1. They're trying to shoot a model that is through a placed smoke grenade named Model B with mimetism -3, who is just trying to move through past the smoke behind and not get shot by a guy with a sniper rifle, say, right? Model A declares an arrow on Model B moving into the line of fire to shooting through smoke, and they're allowed to do it at a -6 because they have MSV level 1. Model B will then declare a dodge at a Fizz skill of 13.
To go, oh my god, don't shoot me.
And then dodge, right? Model A shoots and hits with a 4 on a D20, which is below the needed ballistic skill of 7 with the negatives. And Model B rolls his dodge at an 8, which is below his needed of a 13, but is higher than the 4. And so Model B successfully dodges the shot. But narratively what has happened is a guy saw smoke grenades out, thinks he's safe, starts running, sees the glint of the scope in the corner of his eye, reacts to it and goes, I need to dodge. He probably can see me. Shot goes through, would have hit him where he's at, but because he saw that, he effectively dodges correctly into cover, and now the game continues on, right? Narratively, that's all really cool, and it shows off a bunch of, like, equipment and decision-making and cool stuff that's happening on a table, like in a firefight, but it required you to understand how that all interweaves together with, like, these pluses and minuses of bonuses.
Yeah. It very quickly, the decision tree gets loaded. Now, that is an example of how deep and how many interactions one skill can have. Allow me to show you one of the units that I bring to the table, the Imperial Guard Hatamoto. What you will notice has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 rules on his sheet. And that's not even getting into the guns, because we're just going to leave those off.
Yep.
Oh, it's so many rules, and the interactions get colossal. And we're not going to get into all those, because it would not be good to talk through. But it's just, I want to show an example of what we mean by this game can be overwhelming when you try playing it.
And one of the things, though, that once you get past that initial cliff, that's really handy, is that once you've learned a rule, it starts to just make sense on the table, right? It doesn't, for the vast majority of the rules in here, like, you hear it and you go, oh, okay, the visor lets me see more gooder. Cool. And then it just makes sense. And now when you're playing, you're just like, when somebody goes, hey, I have MSV1, that's all you need to say. And your opponent goes, oh, okay, I completely understand.
Yep.
And, like, you all get it. But the foundational acquiring of that base knowledge is a lot. It is, so the game isn't necessarily difficult. It is just a lot of required understanding and reading. And especially if you're a person who likes to learn by doing, you're going to have to play a lot of games of Infinity where you're probably just going to get got.
Hey, that's me. We have one of those.
We're both that way, and so we both get got constantly. The amount of times you're playing a game where I would do something, he'd be like, I didn't realize I work like that. All right, cool. God damn. And then he would do the same thing to me. I'd be like, all right, cool. You killed 3 of my dudes with a heavy machine gun. All right, neat. Like, and it's sort of, we want to set that expectation that this does interest you, right? That when you go into your first couple games, you very, very much, you should always do it when you're getting into new games, but especially in this game. Take the concept of winning and losing and just huck it out the window.
It does not matter. It cannot exist in this learning sphere.
You are playing, and what is a success in a game of early Infinity on the journey is, did I learn a new rule, right? Did I understand a new concept, right? I've been playing this for months now, and I'm still learning new stuff. I barely understand how hacking works, and I've got like some hacking and stuff. I got like one of my cool gunfighting dudes with like super armor got hacked because I didn't know how it worked, and he was just like, my opponent looked at me and was like, "Yeah, your dude's immobilized, it can't move anymore." I'm like, "That sucks," but also that's actually kind of cool. Like it's sick. You hacked into my AOL email and just gave me turbo virus. Neat. But also, how do I use my gun now?
Yeah, sorry, I hacked a robot and hit the power button. Crap. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah, so like it's an amazing game, right? And so that sort of brings us to our final point, which is, okay, but is it worth it, right? We've done a shit ton of learning. We've played a lot of games. We've
played a full league.
A lot of stuff.
A whole league with people.
With very intense rules, all sorts of different armies and everything else. And like, how do we answer that question? And both of us are sort of people that generally like games with a high level of player agency. And you get to make decisions, and you always feel like you can do something, right? And that the game isn't rote, right? Mm-hmm. We also tend to like simpler games, which makes those two things sort of clash at times. But this game is what we like to call a Goldilocks situation.
Mm-hmm.
Where it is just simple enough that the core mechanics make sense. It's just simple modifiers, right? And play counterplay, but it's intuitive, and the ludonarrative there is close enough that we can go, oh, I can play this like narratively, and it all makes sense in my head, but also all the mechanics also generally make sense. There's a couple of exceptions, because it's Infinity. It's full of exceptions. But we can generally just play the game and understand roughly what's going on after playing it for a long time. And for me, at least, it's also a game that I can see myself playing for years and not getting bored, simply because every game is different. No two games in Infinity are exactly the same. And the biggest reason, beyond all the rule stuff for me, is that when you build a terrain table for Infinity, you're incentivized to never build the same layout ever again. It is just always different, and it's built into the system to allow for the craziest terrain setups you can imagine, which is a huge selling point for me, is that this game, I can just play, even if N5 is the last edition and they never update, I could probably play this game for like 10 years and not get bored of it, just because of how deep it is.
Yeah, I think the amount of player agency that it gives you is worth the on-ramp of how difficult it is to try to learn that baseline. Like, I wish they set it up a little differently. The book is not laid out well for you to like use it as a reference live during game. Stuff that you would want near each other is not. It's all over the place. It's hard to intuitively see. AROs are also really hard to get your head around all of the different decision points until someone lays it out in front of you. However, once someone took the rules of, I'll use an example of AROs, and then put them in a flowchart, like a simple little step-by-step decision flowchart, it became much easier for me, because I didn't have to read through all of it and all the various skills and sections. I just got to see it all right there. Which speaks to the quality of the rules. It's just like a layout and delivery problem, is a thing. Also, for me, one of the things I have really come to enjoy about Infinity is I play with a lot of people who are galaxy brain, rules crunchy people, right? And they will read rules text and talk it through with damn near a microscope on top of the wording and implications and intentions and try to figure out how everything works on the table. And they have been able to do that to talk their way through the Infinity rules set. It's just, for me, when I have a rules question on Infinity and I'm trying to think through how something works, I close my eyes and I picture a firefight in which this thing is happening while they are trying to like argue it out amongst themselves, right? How does this work? An example was like we were trying to figure out when you do and do not get cover right? Because it is very clear that, like, you don't just get cover because you are partially obscured. You know, if there's a barricade halfway between you and me and we're shooting at each other, it doesn't mean you get cover. It says you have to touch it. But, you know, if I touch that thing and you are to my side or something, do you still get cover? And while they're trying to, like, talk it through, just close my eyes and I just picture I'm behind a barricade. You got a rifle. Try to shoot someone. The barricade's between me and them. It's good. If you come from behind me, I'm dead. And then sure enough, the rules people, 15 minutes later, come to the conclusion, yes, it works that way. I had already came to that conclusion because just thinking it through, the rules had led me there.
Makes sense.
Yes.
But that
is
sometimes counter to our experience in war games.
Yes. And there are a couple of rules, interactions, exceptions that break my brain. I will not get turbo into them, but there are some fire team rules that get a little weird. But normally, the Ludo narrative setup is golden here. Like, truly golden. And for me, that's a ton of fun. That I could just, like, logic my way through all of this. And then get to the tabletop a little easier rather than having to read the nitty-gritty.
And another thing for me is that it is engaging, right? The entire time. It's one of the reasons I like Conquest too, right? Is that the time in which my opponent is making a decision can be long, but it is one decision, and then I get to respond or do a thing, right? Or activate a unit or do something in response, generally, right? Now, I have to set some stuff up, but it's unlike some other games in which I might be waiting for my opponent who has to make like a really tough decision. And if I'm a person who has made them have to make tough decisions, they might be having to make tough decisions for an hour and a half. Well, I sit there and I'm just waiting for them to make decisions. Because I try to be a good opponent in our casual settings, oftentimes it ends up having conversations where they're like, I have a tough decision between A and B. Can you help me make a decision between A and B? And I'm trying to navigate the, how do I help you make that decision while we're also still actively playing a game section. But in games like Infinity, right, specifically, my opponent does a thing, I then respond, and we move on. Because there was one decision that needed to be made. There's some weight on it, but not as much. And then I get to have a reaction. And then we move on. And it keeps us engaged, both as players, and the game never really feels like, I deployed my models on the table, I got obliterated before I even had a turn, and now I've lost. Even if you lose the game on turn 1, because your opponent pushes in your deployment zone and kills a bunch of your guys, you're getting to like shoot and dodge and move and do things in response that makes the game still feel like a game. So it never feels like a wash. It always feels like you did something.
And also, some of these units are just cool. Like, I want to get out of the nitty-gritty rule stuff for just a moment, because they're space werewolves and Cosmoflot NASA werebears with rocket hammers, cyber ninjas, exactly.
Grenade hammers, like
electro samurai. Like it's just cool.
I shit you not. There's like 8 or 9 different units in this game that are on motorcycles in different ways. There's a dude who looks like a Templar with a bastard sword riding a motorcycle and what looks like a motocross helmet. Like
it's incredible. There's just so much of this that I look at and go, oh, yes, please.
There's robots, there's werewolves, there's motorcycles. It's ticking every box for both of us. Like
truly, it's just cool. It's so cool. It's so cool. And all of the nitty-gritty, sometimes there's a temptation to be distracted away from the cool to do the mechanics. But politely and firmly, I say, no thank you. And like I'm going to lean into how cool.
We were talking about, before this game, we were talking about one of the units in Shindabutai, one of the JSA factions. And it is a dude riding a motorcycle with a sword and a grenade launcher who deploys robot koala bears that when they detect an enemy will run up to them, hug them, and explode.
Yes.
And all of that's cool. Like, there's a bunch of rules to make that feel super cool when you're using it too, but the premise on the baseline is cool ninja dude on a motorcycle with a samurai sword, a grenade launcher, and a killer koala bear robot.
I made a koala bear that's a mine with legs, and it likes hugging.
Like, this is great. Like,
it's so good. It's just, I could see why this game has a reputation for having like a deeply competitive community, right? I'm not surprised. I'm really not surprised. When you put this rule set out there, I am sure it is like a beacon, a moth, well, a flame that calls all of the hyper-competitive moths to come flock around it. And I get that. That's cool. I bet it's even great for that, right? That they're not wrong. I get why it has that reputation. But also, though, one of the things that we have found in talking about it is that there is an incredible amount of potential for deeply narrative-focused missions and game setups. That's staggering. And I'm shocked they aren't being used.
And even some of their competitive missions are deeply narrative in like baseline. Like some of the like competitive missions aren't just like stand on circles, get points. It's like, hey, there's a virus that got released inside of this lab, and it's starting to infect everything around slowly, more and more towards the center. Also, you're having to grab high-value targets who cannot be inside that zone and get them out to safety. And you go, wow, that's awesome. And beyond that, like, you have the ability to write some crazy concepts here because of all the rules, right? Like, you could use, like, maybe, we'll use an example for a mission, right? You have to get a high-value target out who is very specific on the table, and there's also civilians that need evac. Well, okay, so you have to do both those things, and you have drop ships on other sides of the table you're trying to direct these people to. Maybe those citizens can act as eclipse zones that can't be shot through because they're civilians that are moving around, and then you still have the rules for high-value targets that you're grabbing and trying to get around. And you're just like making this interwoven tale of what you're trying to do. Maybe you add more to it, and you're trying to do that while also defending a crashed dropship that's full of important intel. Or maybe you throw all of that away, and you make it to where, you know, someone is infiltrating a science facility on Shinju full of alien artifacts that they're trying to get out and back to their dropship with. Right? All of this writes itself quickly and easily with very little, like, suspension of disbelief in the sense of game mechanics.
Yes.
It just goes.
In the dropship example, let's say like you get the relic, right? These are non-replicatable, highly rare, highly valuable, highly delicate ancient relics, right? Let's say if someone picks up the relic, they get the Eclipse Zone rule on them. Not because they're static that ruins all of your visors, but because your commander is in your ear right now as you line up the shot to shoot the guy holding the fragile relic, saying, if you pull that trigger and break that relic, you're going in the brig forever. If you damage that thing, it's an international calamity. Don't shoot it. Don't shoot it. You don't want to be sent to mega prison. You're not going to take the shot. And as that guy walks across the table, you aren't going to shoot him with your rocket launcher, because obviously that's a terrible idea. Now you have to get up close and try to take it from him in melee, where you can assure the safety of the relic that you then are going to pick up and try to scramble.
Yeah. Meanwhile, motorcycle dude just goes, hell yeah, just runs out with his motorcycle, stabs the samurai sword through him, grabs the relic, gets on his motorcycle, and leaves.
Yes.
Like, and you go, 100%, that's how I'd handle the situation.
Makes sense. I mean, I don't want to go to prison for shooting the rocket launcher at the relic. I don't know what you want from me. Like, it's the amount of fun Tom Clancy novel-esque special forces scenarios that you could make for this is just, it's huge. It's vast. And,
yes.
Around us, we have floated this idea of people like, hey, y'all, like, we just did this newbie league. There's a whole lot of people around us who are newer to Infinity. Like, we didn't really know the community vibes. Hey, like, if we were maybe to try to set up some narrative Infinity, like a little game day to do some narrative missions, would folks be down? And I kind of thought the answer would be, no thank you, from everyone. But even from the veterans, it has been a vehement yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I didn't expect. That's great. So we actually might try to put some of these together just for shiggles to give people mission briefings, and then send them out into these weird, wacky deployment setups that are entirely built on plausible flavor, to see what comes from it. I think that would be a great time. And the Infinity rules are flexible enough to allow for that. And that is impressive to do while also being incredibly competitively viable. Like, to somehow not tie up all of the creativity in that. And it's not a perfect game. There are downsides. There are some of these rules that make no sense to me. Like, the idea that if in a fire team, your sergeant starts shooting at the enemy using a lieutenant order, that the team falls into disarray makes no sense to me. How albedo interacts with marksmanship doesn't make sense to me, and like, there are a lot of exceptions that are kind of hard to shoot through. It's all very fair. But the downsides are far, 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 far smaller than the upsides. And we have had a ball with Infinity, and we just want to continue playing more.
Yeah, and if you're a guy who already plays Infinity, and you really want to get people involved, may I give you a moment of advice as a guy who recently got back into the game, playing at N5, and that is, go slow with them. Start with like a handful of models, maybe 3 or 4, and slowly, incrementally improve. And also, point out what arrows your opponent are capable of as they're playing the game. They're not going to be able to recognize this at all. They have no idea why. But if you set up a situation in which you cause an ARO, you tell them, hey, you could possibly do this, and like, or here are your options, which one would you like to do? And then walk them through why they have those options, you're going to do a better job of teaching these people. And I think that's ultimately the way to teach this game, is just like, honest to goodness, having teaching games, not just games, for a while. And then actively afterwards, playing the game sort of from intention as well. And then escalating to the other stuff, right? Because then it doesn't feel like a gotcha when someone does something clever. It feels like, they were clever, which is a very different feeling once you've built that level of understanding and like baseline knowledge, right? When Joe pulls out a cool trick against me, it doesn't feel like he got me or like lied to me. It feels like, that's cool. Can't believe he pulled one over on me like that. We only got there because we for a long time was like, we weren't relying on the lack of knowledge of my opponent to win. We were relying on the cleverness of my move to win.
Yes. And maybe those, if y'all are interested, if this hits and you guys want more advice, you're interested in Infinity, you want to get into it, or maybe you want to get other people into it if you want to teach. If you're interested, let us know. We could do an episode specifically on, here is how we recommend starting to learn Infinity as people who have just recently learned Infinity. I think that would maybe be good all on its own. And if that's the case,
if you just want us to,
let us know.
Or if you just want us to like hammer in and just talk about all the different lore of Infinity because we're all about it.
Let us know. I will do that in a hot second. I had to cut out so much to try to keep this reasonable, and it's still way too long of an episode, but there is much potential to talk about here, because I didn't even get to dive into Hawk, and that's my favorite faction. Holy crap. But yeah, if y'all want that, let us know. And we will be working on other episodes in the near future. If you want to stay up to date on that, you like this flavor of like casual good time, like, subscribe. It really does help us a ton. And also, if you're maybe trying to build some Infinity players in your group, show the video to them. It might help them if they also like the vibe. And we'll be working on more stuff over here on our end. That's been all of our opinions, bona fide, and Kentucky Fried. See y'all in the next one.